So today is Wednesday, March 5th, 2026. Excuse me, Wednesday, March 4th, 2026. I'm really terrible with numbers. And I want to begin tonight with a personal story that happened to me several years ago. And after 7-day sessions in my previous community, the Sangha would often all get together and head down to the Hop. And the Hop is a local vegan-friendly ice cream shop. And for those of you who have ever done sashimi, there is absolutely nothing like a huge ice cream sundae, specifically chocolate ice cream with peanut butter sauce on top, after 7 days of silence and intensive practice. It is just one of the most beautiful things in the world for me. And also during sesshin, where I practiced, you had to wear brown robes and solid colors. And so after a week of walking around, and just really non-eye-catching clothing, I went back to my normal clothes, which is I had this really long, colorful skirt on and a headscarf that didn't match. And I probably wore my shirt that says, "I just really love pigs," because I love pigs and I used to have rescue pigs. So all of this is to say, we all gather in the driveway, so then we all can carpool. And my husband, Matt, and I, we were talking to a high-ranking member of our Sangha. And he looked at Matt and he said, "Are you going to let your wife go out looking like that?" Right in front of me.
Is that Andy?
I'm not going to say who it is, but no, that one is not Andy.
No, yes. It's probably not Andy.
Yes,
right.
Yes. So just
okay.
You're good, yeah. So just to say, my husband responded something smart ass, something like, "I don't control the way my wife dresses," or something like that. I bring this up because this is a very small example of many stories of how even in so-called awake communities, even after decades and lifetimes of practice, conscious and unconscious discrimination is still alive and well. And Buddhism, like every other spiritual path out there, is not immune to racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, etc. So flash forward to a few weeks ago, and I did my first in-person sesshin here at Great Mountain. And Shinko-roshi, she talked about how the sixth Dharma ancestor, Master Huineng, was the mother of Buddhism. And this really blew my mind. And first thing I want to note is that she specifically used the word ancestor and not patriarch. And when Buddhist groups use the word patriarch, we are not just renaming history or naming history. We are reinforcing a structure of authority that centers on maleness. And patriarch literally means father ruler. So the fact that this female identifying Roshi specifically used the word ancestor was purposeful. And in digging a little deeper, I believe when we choose ancestor, it can include all gender identities. It suggests a spirituality of belonging rather than domination. It allows for the recognition of gender diverse teachers. It disrupts the unconscious and sometimes very conscious message that the awakening authority is male. And not just Buddhism, but patriarchal religious structures have been sites of exclusion or harm. And so when we use Dharma ancestor, it softens the field. It moves from domination to continuity, from vertical hierarchy to horizontal belonging. And most importantly, awakening is beyond male or female or however we identify on the gender spectrum. And so why would awakening be framed as male? Awakening reflects the deeper teaching of non-self and fixed identity. So then, when she called Huineng the mother of Zen, I felt like this was a really radical act. And what struck me about this is we don't know what Huineng's gender identity is. We assume he's male. We assume he's male, but maybe he's not. We'll never know. And so as a result of this, I did the nerdy thing that I do, and I started doing a deep dive into his life. So just to say that Huineng was born into poverty in southern China. He was illiterate. His father passed away very young, so he was selling firewood to support him and his mother. And while selling firewood, he encountered the Buddhist teachings. And so he overheard someone reciting the Diamond Sutra, specifically the line, "Arouse the mind without it abiding anywhere." And from that, he had an awakening. So from this, Huineng went and traveled at various places, and then later on, he ended up at Hongren's monastery, and this was our fifth Dharma ancestor. And he was there for, several months and was just, grinding rice and working on his practice and didn't draw attention to himself. And all of a sudden, there was this opportunity to compose a verse expressing one's understanding of the Dharma. And this person would become Hongren's heir. This would become the sixth Dharma ancestor. And so, like so many of the Buddhist stories, the senior monk, his name was Jinshu, everybody expected him to be the one to take over. And he wrote his verse, I think it was on a wall somewhere in the temple, and he wrote, "The body is the Bodhi tree, the mind a bright mirror stand. Polish it diligently, and let no dust alight." So with this verse here that he wrote, this can reflect gradual cultivation or gradual depth of practice, because we're polishing the mirror of our mind or of mind. So Huineng comes along, and he couldn't write and he can't read, but he came up with a verse. So he asked somebody to write his verse for him. And it said, "Bodhi originally has no tree. The mirror also has no stand. Originally, there is not a single thing. So where could dust arise?" And unlike the senior monk Jinshu's verse, this one was expressing sudden awakening. And there's nothing to polish because there was never dust to begin with. So these stories make Huineng rather subversive in the Zen world. And it goes along with why Shinko-roshi would call Huineng the mother of Zen. So Huineng, as I mentioned before, he was illiterate, he was poor, he was not a part of elite religious culture, and just to say that Zen was for the elite at this time. And so he was relegated to grinding rice for months. He came from a marginalized region of China, and yet, even with all of these things, he still becomes the sixth ancestor. And so this transmission from fifth to sixth ancestor overturns the myth that awakening belongs to this small group of people. So whether that's institutional insiders or just educated men or spiritually qualified because of financial access, like Huineng's story carries this really powerful message that awakening is not conferred by patriarchy or by those who have access to privilege. It's about direct experience. And so in modern day terms, for those of us who are BIPOC or are women or who identify outside of the gender binary, queer practitioners and other historically excluded groups from power and authority, this is a sign that we belong, that we are a part of this one true practice. And even Huineng's verse undermines binary thinking. So he says no tree, no dust, no practice. It's not tree, dust, practice. Because Zen itself is a tradition of undoing rigid categories. And this can really resonate deeply because awakening is not conformity. It's not fitting into your inherited roles. It's not changing yourself or polishing yourself so that you can be acceptable. You don't need to change who you are in order to belong. And I've also been doing a deep dive into trauma-informed practices in Buddhist communities and how we can meet people better who have experienced trauma. And if we look at this from a trauma-informed lens, we have Jinsu, the head monk's verse, and it says, "The body is the Bodhi tree, the mind a bright mirror stand. Polish it diligently and let no dust alight." So in communities shaped by religious harm or discrimination, the metaphor of polishing away dust can feel like you are flawed, you must purify yourself, you're not worthy. And so Huineng's verse disrupts this. There is no tree. There is no stand. There was never a single thing, so there can't be dust. There was never dust to begin with. And so from a trauma-sensitive lens, this can be healing. You're not broken. Practice does not fix you. It reveals you, whoever you are. And just to say, patriarchy within Buddhism and other religious traditions is also detrimental to those who identify as cisgender men because it narrows what masculinity can be or what masculinity should look like. So when spiritual authority is framed as father or patriarch or protector, holder of the robe, the final authority, the commander, men are subtly taught that you must be strong, certain, and unwavering. Vulnerability is a weakness. Doubt is failure. Emotional fluidity or even sexual fluidity undermines authority. And if you're the patriarch, you can't be wrong. But Zen, especially in the way that Huineng teaches it, it's full of not knowing and falling down and being corrected and being laughed at because it undermines a fixed identity. I don't know about all of you, but I have been corrected so many times in my Zen life. And I've also learned to laugh at myself because nothing is fixed. So here's another story about Huineng that sort of goes a little bit deeper in terms of how patriarchy can impact and is detrimental to cisgender men as well. So in case 23 of the Mumonkan, Huineng is escaping the monastery. He had just received Dharma transition from Hongren and is now the sixth ancestor, and he receives the robes in the bowl. And he sneaks out in the middle of the night because he wasn't of the right class, he didn't have the right intelligence, he didn't have the money, he could be killed by jealous monks. So he escapes into the mountains. So there's this monk Mio. He chases after Huineng because he is so upset. Why does this nobody man, why is he the Dharma ancestor? So Monk Mio runs after, and Huineng is going up to the mountains. And so Monk Mio follows, and Monk Mio is just exhausted from like climbing and hiking up this mountain. And he finally catches up to Huineng. And in this moment, Huineng asks him, thinking neither good nor evil, at this very moment, where was the original self of Monk Mio? And at this, Monk Myo was enlightened. In the commentary of this koan, it shares, quote, "The sixth ancestor did something extraordinary. He is a kindly grandmother who peels a fresh lychee, removes the seeds, and puts it in your mouth, so you need only swallow it." And I believe that this use of the word grandmother is purposeful. It conveys the nurturing, relational, non-authoritative transmission of Zen. It frames awakening as a gift and not a conquest. Patriarchal framing pressures some men to conquer and to be solid and to not be vulnerable, but awakening dissolves this stoicism and the solidity of masculine coded emotion. And so when Monk Myo finally awakened, he had tears flowing down his face and bowed down. Monk Myo finally had freedom to express who he is, just as he is, thanks to Huineng's grandmotherly kindness. So when we honor Huineng, we're not bowing to patriarchy. We're bowing to the moment when someone heard a single line of the Diamond Sutra and recognized their own true nature. And this recognition does not belong to any gender or class or role. It belongs to the living heart of practice. I want to bring it back a little bit to the use of the word ancestor versus patriarch again. So oftentimes in chanting, when we do the ancestral line, or in some of the dedications here at Great Mountain, it's to all the unnamed women. And what's so fascinating to me is there's a text called The Verses of the Elder Nuns, where there are 70 names of awakened women in the collection alone. And that's only those whose verses survived. So from the very beginning, women were recognized as fully capable of liberation. But what happens is that those who compiled this were traditionally male monastics. In traditional Chan lineage, there are 8 Indian ancestors, and then the Chinese ancestors, and the rest are male. However, we know there were women who were practicing and teaching. And here's the crucial part. Most of the women were not recorded as lineage holders, even though they were clearly teachers. So the official ancestor lists reflects institutional patriarchy, not the full reality of practice. In Japan, formal lineage charts, again, historically, exclusively almost all male ancestors. Yet, women practiced continuously as nuns, as lay teachers, as temple leaders, as abbesses. Many are unnamed. And many were not recognized as formal transmitters, even though they functioned as such. So when we shift our language from patriarch to Dharma ancestor, it doesn't diminish men, it frees them. It allows them to be ancestors without being conquerors, or leaders without always having to be right, or practitioners without armor, and now with emotional vulnerability. So you may be thinking, how many women ancestors are there? If you mean how many women appear on official patriarchal lineage charts, very few. But if you mean how many women transmitted practice, realized awakening, and shaped Buddhism, almost certainly thousands across 2,500 years. So Most women were not recorded or recorded as anonymous, or they were recorded as wives or daughters or disciples without authority and erased from institutional memory. And so I want you to think about Layman Pang, whose wife and daughter both had deeper practice than Layman Pang himself, but we're using Layman Pang's name. So let us use their real names. So Layman Pang's wife, her name is Peng Shi, and Layman Pang's daughter is Ling Zhao. And I think the deeper issue with all of this is that who counts as an ancestor? If awakening is not gendered, if it's fluid, it can be anybody who's embodied the Dharma, which means the historical list is really incomplete. It's radically incomplete. And this is because of structural erasure. It just means history was written selectively. So to wrap up, and I would love to hear any insights or objections or things that resonated with you or things you have questions on. About 10 years ago, a member of the Polish branch of the Windhorse Sangha asked Shinko-roshi, who had her first awakening at 19, if women can be enlightened. And Shinko-roshi just laughed. And that was that. So, thank you for your listening and for your kindness in this. And I would welcome it to open to any discussion whatsoever. Thank you.